I remember getting that phone call saying, can you come over? And I said, sure. And I remember joking with Lori, just, like I normally do. And, I guess it's not as simple as getting a prescription called in. And
they're going to tell me I have to have my kidney stones removed.
So I went over there and I knew something was up because usually any medical appointment you go in, how you check in, you wait, you get called back, you wait in a room.
They brought you right back.
Mr. McDonald, and just brought me back into a room, and 2 seconds later the doctor comes in, no nurse, or technician, and has one piece of paper in his hand and sat down and said, you have cancer.
Welcome to Hope Comes to Visit. I'm Danielle Elliott Smith. This is a space for listening to stories, for real conversations, for moments of resilience, for light, for focusing on the good when we've been going through some of the hard things. I'm really excited you're here today. The conversation we're getting ready to have is with someone I have known for a number of years. And when I was first thinking about this podcast, he was one of the first people who came to mind. He personifies hope, even when you are going through something extremely difficult, something that would potentially bring someone else to their knees. Let's take a quick moment to thank the people that support and sponsor the podcast. When life takes an unexpected turn, you deserve someone who will stand beside you. St. Louis attorney Chris Dully offers experienced one-on-one legal defense. Call 314-384-4000 or 314-DUI-HELP. Or you can visit dullylawfirm.com. That's DULLE lawfirm.com for a free consultation. I'm really excited to introduce you to my friend, Tim McDonald. Tim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Danielle. I'm so excited to be part of this with you.
It's interesting because, you and I were having a conversation earlier, and I want you to introduce our community to a little bit of your story, but I'll start by saying this. You have always been one of the happiest, most delightful, most pleasant people I've ever known. I came across recently, I was telling you, a picture of you and I, which legitimately was taken 12 years ago yesterday. And the look on my face when I'm looking at you is how I feel every time I read your words, every time I see your face, every time I'm having a conversation with you, because you exude warmth and positive energy. And you received a handful of years ago some pretty devastating news, and yet you remained you. You remained positive and energetic and full of life. Will you share a little bit of your experience with us?
Well, sure. It's, and I just need to say that picture is one of my favorites too. I don't know why. I mean, it's so funny that you brought that up. I just, you get so many pictures taken, or you take so many of yourself too. And it's just like, there's certain ones that stick out and you always like, and that was one of my favorites. So thank you for sharing that. But it was back in 2020, we all remember COVID. And my wife and I were just trying to make the best of it. And while everybody else was complaining about being stuck at home, and you're reading all these articles about, marriages and partnerships being pulled apart because you were under the same roof 24/7. For us, it was something that we embraced, and we actually, I think, became a little bit closer. But then in November of that year, I started experiencing a pain in my side and some other things that were just not typical. And, I can look back on them now and say, oh yeah, these were all signs of having cancer. But at the time, nobody put it all together. Nobody was saying, Tim, you have cancer. It was all like, our dad had diabetes, so maybe it was diabetes, maybe it was a kidney stone, maybe it was this. And I didn't have insurance at the time, so I was kind of dragging my feet about going to the doctor.
Isn't it crazy how we do that?
Yeah.
We put it off, we put it off, we put it off. So how long did you put it off?
I was going to say, I'm like I was your typical male who, it'll be fine, everything will work out, and I don't need to see anybody. They're just going to put me on medicine. I don't want to be on medication. I was that person. That's who I was. But it got so bad that on Thanksgiving of 2020, I remember telling Lori, my wife, that I had this bad pain in my right side. And she encouraged me to go to the urgent care because we have one that we can walk to. You still need to make reservations to go in at that time. But each day I would get up and she'd be like, "Are you going?" And I'm like, I finally just told her, I'm just going to go on Monday when when it's a work week. If it's not better, I'll go on Monday. And then Sunday morning she got up and I was already awake. And instead of saying good morning, I said, I made an appointment to go to urgent care. I'm going in about an hour. And she said, I thought you weren't going until Monday. And I said, it just got so bad, I just couldn't stand it anymore. So I went and they weren't sure. They thought it might have been a kidney stone, but ordered a CT scan. I went for my CT scan on Monday, and the urgent care doctor called me back to his office. And I remember getting that phone call saying, can you come over? And I said, sure. And I remember joking with Lori, just, like I normally do. And, I guess it's not as simple as getting a prescription called in. And
they're going to tell me I have to have my kidney stones removed.
So I went over there and I knew something was up because usually any medical appointment you go in, how you check in, you wait, you get called back, you wait in a room.
They brought you right back.
Mr. McDonald, and just brought me back into a room. And 2 seconds later, the doctor comes in, no nurse, or technician, and has one piece of paper in his hand and sat down and said, you have cancer. And
those 3 words, you have cancer, just changes everything, right?
And it changed everything. But, I think it was all the work that I had put in for about a decade before that, as far as like mindfulness and, just consciousness of, what happens to us. Not how we react to something isn't going to change what happened. It's only going to change our output and our response to it. And so what I really wanted to look at was in that moment was, okay, I'm here. It wasn't what I was planning on. It wasn't what I was expecting. But really what I need to do and what is important is, what do I need to do next? Like right now, what do I need to do? And I had a good doctor that understood me and actually listened to me and said, I know you don't have insurance. I know you don't have a primary doctor. Would you mind driving, a little distance to meet with a GI doctor that I used to work with in the ER if I text him right now?
Wow.
And I said, sure. And he got me an appointment that afternoon to go into the GI doctor. We got a colonoscopy scheduled. And
so where was your cancer?
It was in my colon.
Okay. And they could see that from the scan they had done.
They could see that. And now typically, and I don't want to get too scientific here because I know that's not where you're going, but like in colon cancer in your colon, unless if the blockage is enough to see the entire wall or real thickening of your wall, it won't show up on a CT scan.
I was going to say, because normally we're getting our colonoscopy for colon cancer, and instead this is manifesting as pain in your right side. So pain in my right side, I'm thinking gallbladder, kidney, appendix, right? So,
well, it was also kind of all over my liver. He didn't say that at the time, but it was there were spots on my liver, as I think he referred to it as. Okay. And so when I went to go get the colonoscopy, you still need to get your COVID test. He had asked if I wanted a bag or a stent. And I asked him, well, you're the expert, not me. And he goes, well, if it was me, I'd get a stent. And I'm like, well, that's what I thought. Let's do that. And so I got a stent. And then I just got connected with, I remember during this time, it seems like it took forever. But now that I look back on it compared to a lot of other people, this all happened very fast. I just wanted things to be like, I wanted to know, like, okay, let's get the colonoscopy done. let me get in and talk to a surgeon. Let me get in and talk to an oncologist. And it was like, nothing moves as quick as you want it to when you're diagnosed with cancer.
When you look back on it now and you recognize that it did move more rapidly than other people you know who have been given that diagnosis, do you recognize that they moved more rapidly because of the severity of your diagnosis?
Yes, I see that. I also can see how certain nurses and doctors were talking to me back in that day, at that time.
In what way?
Very comforting, very assuring that, and I'm not a very religious person, but just that, in their own way that, God was going to be with me and, that I had strength and that they would pray for me and all this stuff. And, at the time I just thought, oh, that's nice, but I didn't realize, like, now I look back on it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's because nobody thought I had a chance of living more than a few years.
Okay. So that's what I was going to ask you. So people are talking to you in a soft, we're going to love you as best we can right now because, oh my gosh, this poor guy's not going to make it.
Yes. And
So
I just thought they were very compassionate people at the time.
Which, I suppose is good that you didn't recognize the doom and gloom with which that was not intended, but that what was behind that, right? That the severity of your diagnosis, that you didn't take that in.
Well, I don't think I did in the way that most people take it in. I took it in a slightly different way because when I learned that there's only about 15% of patients that survive for 5 years with stage 4 colorectal cancer, my mind didn't go anywhere except to the fact that this is the only time I'm going to believe a statistic. I want to be part of that 15%.
You know what's so funny that you say that? When I was in treatment, there are some places in treatment where they look around the room and they say, well, a year from now, statistically speaking, 2 of you guys are going to be dead. 8 of you will have relapsed within the first 3 months. Only 1 of you is still going to be sober. And I am the kind of person that looks around and goes, well, I'm the sober one. What are the rest of you doing? Right? And how did you put yourself immediately in that 15%?
I believed it. I didn't put myself there. I just believed it.
Okay.
I don't know. I can't explain why. I think it's just who I am, right? It's like I've always felt like I never fit in with the mainstream. I was always a little bit different and unique. And I'll
second that.
And I always tried to leverage that as one of my superpowers. I never referred to it as a superpower, but I tried to embrace that instead of trying to hide it.
Okay.
And I think that for me, it was just a natural feeling to say, I'm going to be the underdog here, right? I'm not going to go with the odds. I'm going to go against the odds, and I'm going to prove everybody wrong.
That makes me tear up, Tim. So you are part of that 15%.
Well, not officially yet. I'm just over 4.5 years, so I haven't reached 5 years yet. But I've been no evidence of disease for the last 2 years. And I mean, we can get into a lot more of my story, but that's when I received a living donor liver transplant, which removed the remaining cancer out of my body in my liver. And I've ever since that point, I've been no evidence of disease. And I get checked, now we move to every 6 months with my scans. I just graduated to that. So I feel confident that I will be one of those statistics still today. And my odds are even better than if I was in active treatment that I would make it to 5 years.
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
Your story is extraordinary on so many levels, right? Not just because you are absolutely going to be one of the 15%, right? But because you've believed it all along, how do we bottle that for other people? I know one of the things that you said in the beginning of the interview, in the beginning of our conversation, was that some of the work you had been doing for the previous 10 years prepared you for the moment of hearing those three words and jumping into a positive mindset. What was your shift in the previous 10 years? What made you change, and what were your fundamental changes? How do we bottle that for other people?
Yeah, well, I think, this is what I tell everybody all the time. It's not a light switch you can flip on and off. It's like if you've never been in a gym and don't work out at all and decide to go to the gym, you're going to feel it for the first probably month. I mean, to the point where at some point you don't want to go back because it hurts so much.
Right.
And practicing consciousness and mindfulness is the same thing. It's not something that you just flip a switch and it happens. You need to put in the work. You need to put in the effort. It started for me when I actually worked at HuffPost because Ariana was so big into that. And we had a lot of work related, workshops and times where we could embrace going to like mindfulness or breathing techniques or yoga or as our famous nap rooms, with the nap pods in there. I was exposed to all that as an employee, but with our blogger program, we had a lot of bloggers that talked about this. And I would start having conversations with them on the phone and explaining as I started trying some of this on my own and what I was experiencing and what I was doing. And I remember one of them told me, because I thought I always used to preface my conversations by saying, if I was just saying this in public, somebody would come with a straitjacket and bring me to a loony bin, because it's like I'm having conversations with myself, and I'm doing all these weird things. But they told me, Tim, you are reaching a level of enlightenment that most people never get to.
Okay.
And that just helped me understand it's not how we get there. It's doing it in our own way and experiencing things in our own way that matters. It's not repeating what somebody else is telling you how to do it. It's finding our own way. And for me, that really I became aware of that because most people don't know this about me. I have a very bad temper. In the last 15 years, I have learned to tame that temper a lot better than what I used to do. I still am not perfect. I still have my moments. But I always share this as an example of what I did to start gaining consciousness of my actions. I remember the first time, and usually this temper is brought out with my wife because I live under the same roof with her, right? And so
the people who love us the most and see us the most are always the ones who have a front row seat to our
everything
most glaring flaws.
Yes. And so I remember the first time I felt it coming on, all I wanted to do was be aware that I knew this was happening. Step one.
Okay.
Don't try and change anything.
Okay.
Step two, and this happened after several days, right, or several instances, is step two was try and count to 10 before you do anything. And I barely got to 2, I think, for the first few days, and then I maybe got to 5, and it took me another week or so to get to 10.
Okay.
But what I realized by the time I got to 10 was my emotions had come down. And I was thinking more rationally again. And when I thought rationally, I kept thinking of something that I include in a lot of the talks I give, which is Einstein's definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if I'm always reacting the same way, why would I expect something different to happen?
Okay.
So why don't I try something different? Maybe make a joke about it instead of yelling about it. Maybe agree with it instead of disagreeing with it. Maybe just express how I feel in a rational way instead of just blasting her with it. Would I know what the outcome was going to be? No. But I knew what the outcome was going to be if I responded the same exact way. And that's what helped me kind of learn how to control my emotions and kind of realize that it's not what happens to us, it's how we react to things that really matters. And when we can have the consciousness to understand that this is happening, our body, we all have emotions. I'm not saying this to suppress those emotions, but when you feel those emotions coming up, you can't react when you're all emotional. I mean, that's when bad things usually happen to us, or things we regret happen to us. So it's really about like learning how we kind of capture that, bring our emotional level down so that we can start making emotional decisions moving forward.
Did you have any moments of mortality, any moments of feeling sorry for yourself? I know that when you're given a diagnosis like that, when you are told not only you have cancer, right? You hear those words, but also if you start Google MDing yourself at all, or you start looking into what they have just said, or in the quiet moments when you are thinking, you and Lori are talking and you're thinking, wow, this is serious. This is not playtime. This is not one of the easiest cancers. This is not one of the ones where you'll go, oh, no big deal. My aunt, uncle, cousin had that and it was gone in no time. This is real. Did you have moments of fear?
Yes. I'd be lying if I say I didn't, but, and I think you know this about me. I started writing a book about fears and I'll just kind of really sum it up is that fear to me, there's two types of fear. There's rational fear and irrational fear. And most of the time, the fears that we have are irrational, and our ego just makes us think that they're rational fears.
Okay.
And so I've become really good at having a conversation with my ego about the fears that it presents to me and understanding that they don't know, my ego doesn't know anything more about me than I do about what's going to happen down the road. And so, yes, I had fears. Did I believe in those fears? No. And I think that's because of what I talked about earlier about my concept of I am going to be one of the minority statistics here. I am going to be the one who beats this. I am going to figure out a way to beat it, even if all these other things happen. Now, I am fortunate. I never got to but I don't play these games, right? I tell my wife all the time, I don't play the what if game,
Okay.
But if I wasn't in this situation, I can't say exactly how I would have been. If things progressed even worse and I ran out of treatment options, how would I have reacted? How would I have been different? I don't think I would have been too much different, but I don't know until I'm put in that situation, and I wasn't in that situation. But I can tell you from the situation I was put in, I just fully believed that I was going to survive.
I think that your situation was hard enough as it was. I mean, needing a transplant and being in a situation like a stage 4 situation that leaves you with 15%. I think that was hard enough. So the fact that you maintained a positive outlook and continued to be on the upside is incredibly impressive. What advice would you give to someone else facing a similar diagnosis?
Well, there's two things, and I'm going to start with the one that you just kind of touched on, right? It's like you have a tough enough journey in front of you. Don't play the what if game. Deal with what you're facing today. Don't worry about what it's going to be a year from now, 5 years from now. just worry about today. I think when you start embracing that mindset and that kind of way of being, it really relieves a lot of stress and anxiety from you. In cancer land, we call anxiety, it's called scanxiety, because your scans are how they measure whether you're having progression, reduction in your disease or elimination of your disease. And usually from the, you're getting your scans typically every 3 months. You get your scan, you need to wait like 24 to 72 hours. Sometimes some people need to wait a week, but that whole time period of waiting for your scan to happen and then waiting for the results is often called scanxiety. And I didn't experience that too much because I don't play the what if game. Nothing that I'm going to do today is going to change the results of my scan. So why focus and spend all my time and energy right now on the what ifs that might happen? So that's just how I go through. I know it sounds simple. It's a lot harder to do in the moment. And trust me, I know, because I feel like I was prepared for this. But if I was prepared, what I was doing before was playing Little League. I'm now playing, having cancer is like playing in the World Series, right? So this is like, something that I try and help other people. But I also want to share something that it was the first guy who, to your point, everybody reaches out to you when you're first diagnosed, who has had an uncle, had a grandmother, had a whatever, distant cousins who had some form of cancer and got this treatment or got a miracle cure here, or was on this diet that helped them, whatever it was. But this was the first guy, and it was the uncle of a former coworker of mine. And he wasn't on Facebook or social media, but he called me, and I had a conversation with him in the first few weeks after I was diagnosed. And he told me a story that he was told that really helped him. And it was, imagine that you haven't run or even jogged at all in your life. And right now, at this moment, you are being told that you need to run a marathon.
Wow.
And just when you think you're done with that marathon, you're going to be asked to run another one.
Okay.
I think that advice that he told me really helped prepare me mentally for what I was in store for. Okay. This was not going to be just finish my 12 rounds of chemo and I'm done. It's not going to be get this one surgery and you're done. Cancer is, and I still believe this to this day, cancer is always going to be part of me. I may be no evidence of disease now, but what I've gone through, what I still might have to go through, what I am going through still today, both mentally and with tests and checkups and all this other stuff, is because of the cancer. And so it is never going to leave me completely. Even if it's not present in my body, it will always be a part of me.
You said something to me earlier when we were talking about how I don't believe everything happens for a reason. However, I do think that we are supposed to figure out what to do with what does happen to us. And you agree with that on some level. But you said that it took you 3 days.
Yeah, well,
to get to a place that that this was that you needed to figure out what it was you were supposed to do with this. What conclusion did you come to?
Well, I think at that time, I had the unique role of being both a patient and somebody who had a wife I knew who was devastated by this news and didn't know what she was going to do without me. So I needed to try and figure out how to deal with her. At the same time, I was processing all my own information because she was processing it in her own way. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be there for her in that way. So, and then you have all these thousands of people coming to you with all these suggestions. And so it's actually overwhelming. But I remember that, right when we got back from the GI doctor and before I even had my colonoscopy, I know that everything happens for a reason. we just don't know what the reason is usually in the moment. And sometimes we might never know. But our job, I believe, is to try and figure out what lesson are we supposed to be pulling out from what happens to us?
Okay.
What are we supposed to do with this? And it took me, like you said, about 3 days. And in that moment, it became clear to me that I could use my voice to help make sure that other people know about the symptoms, know the age and the way that they should get screened, not rely on their doctors to tell them that they should get it done. And my story is going to be so powerful because chemo sucks. I mean, it is no fun. It basically sucks the life out of you. While it's killing the cancer cells, it kills everything else in your body too. So it is definitely one of those things that did the trick for me, but I mean, it's no fun going through. And that to me, I think is, using that story and being open about it, I mean, I wasn't saying poor me, I'm having to go through this, but This is no fun. I mean, you don't want to have to be sitting on the toilet 7 times in 2 hours, having diarrhea as side effects from your chemo. You don't want to have, internal hemorrhoids that are flaring up and fissures in your butt that, make sitting so uncomfortable that you don't understand, how colon cancer is not literally called a pain in the ass, I mean, if I am open and honest about these things, I can use that to encourage other people to get screened. They do not want to have to go through what I'm going through. And
so
that's what
when
I found
should they
in
get
that moment.
So when should they get screened?
Well,
when should we get screened?
Yeah, so if you don't have a family history and you don't have any symptoms, currently the age is 45. That you should get screened. Now, most people in that situation can just use probably most people are familiar with the Cologuard test, just use one of those. If it comes back positive, you can get a colonoscopy. And at least as of today, it's still covered to be able to get a colonoscopy if you have a positive stool test. Now, I will say this because there's a lot more younger people being diagnosed with colorectal cancer. If you have any symptoms, and most of us all know blood in the stool, right? But if you have night sweats, if you feel cold when it's not really cold outside or inside, I live in Florida, so the air conditioner was going and I needed to go outside to warm up, that's how bad it was. If you have unexplained pains anywhere in your body, those are all symptoms, irregular bowel movements. Those are all symptoms of colorectal cancer.
Interesting. Okay. So that I didn't know. I actually have another question for you because I think sometimes we forget, and this is something that would be specific to your experience. What can people who love people like you who are going through something like this, what is the thing that we do wrong or the thing that we could do better?
Okay, so I'll tell you the thing that most people do wrong, and I will say even fellow patients do this wrong too, is telling a cancer patient they look good. Because I will tell you that most of us
know better.
I don't care how we look on the outside. It has nothing to do with how we feel on the inside. And we're probably in severe pain while you're telling us we look good. So it really is more annoying than helpful.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. And I think these are the things that, I had someone close in my life who was going through cancer a couple of years ago. And I looked at the doctor and I said, what is the one thing that I need to help him do that no one thinks of? Like, what is, and they said, make sure he eats.
Yeah.
Because
that was a big thing for me.
He's not going to want to eat. And if he doesn't eat, he's going to end up with a bag and it will prolong everything. And I'm like, okay, he's going to eat no matter. And because his cancer was in his throat and and so like there are little things like that, you know?
Yeah.
So what else? So we tell people that.
The thing I think people can do better is everybody feels like they want to come up with ideas on what you can do to help yourself, because that's typically what we do. I will tell you that when you are going through treatment, probably the thing that is hit the most is your energy level.
Okay.
So when I have 100 people coming up to me and giving me suggestions of what I should do, I'm like, thank you so much.
I don't even have the energy to tell you.
I don't even have the energy to think about doing that. What I really appreciated was, there were people out there that if I had mentioned something in a conversation, it would be nice if I had a GoFundMe to help with my medical expenses, because I wasn't working. I didn't have insurance.
And you didn't have insurance, right?
So I needed all that. When I needed, a liver transplant, and I was running out of options for just asking my own network. So I knew, as somebody who does community building for a living, that you can't just go back to the same people and ask again and again. You need to have them reach out to their audience. Expand it and expand the reach. And so doing that. But, I remember one of my friends, he's a photographer, and he was selling some prints during the pandemic and of his photos that he took. And for about a month's time, he did a fundraiser where anytime somebody bought, he'd give the proceeds from the sale to my fundraiser.
That's amazing.
And so it wasn't him saying, "Oh, you should come up with an idea of how to raise money." It's
right. It was,
hey, this is my talent. This is my strength. I can use my network and raise money on your behalf.
That's amazing.
And I'll give an instance. There's a lot of other people that came up and said, because if you remember, NFTs were a big deal back at that time, right? And I had people coming, "Hey, I know you're into tech, how are you into NFTs? You should create like an NFT and then sell that and raise money." And I'm like,
yeah, with all of my spare energy,
I don't want to go through the process. This is the difference between helping somebody and telling somebody how they can help themselves.
Right.
And I know that all of our practice through life has been, it's more important to teach somebody how to help themselves than to do it for them. But when you're in cancer world, it becomes critically important to actually do it for them, not to just show them how to do it.
To do for someone, to show up for them.
Yes.
That's amazing. One of the final things I wanted to ask you about is how you are an ambassador for colorectal cancer now. And you also have a podcast that you're working on about people who are doing ambassador and community work for organizations that are important to them. Yeah,
well, I think one of the first things I realized when I started creating awareness was I needed, if I wanted to be spreading the word, I needed to align with organizations that were also spreading the word. And so very quickly, I got invited to be part of Fight Colorectal Cancer Ambassador Program, which just kind of features you alongside other advocates with kind of, your story and getting the word out there and creating awareness. And so that was fantastic. And then I started getting involved in, some other organizations, being a chapter leader for my men's cancer group, Man Up to Cancer, helping out as a empowered patient leader with Colon Town, another organization that I'm involved with. And then, with Fight CRC, they have research advocates, and I started getting interested in that, and I became a research advocate with them. And I've gotten asked to speak and attend several conferences, like with the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, and, at their annual conference and at a policy summit. I'm going to industry events. I got to go to the Cologuard Classic this past year. I've been there 3 out of the 4 years. But this year, the pro that I was paired with actually won. So I got a trophy and got to be on the green for the presentation and everything. But I started realizing, like, towards earlier this year, how much I love doing this advocacy work, because you can see the impact in the people that you help. Every day you see it. And I wanted to explore, and I'm starting to see more opportunities come my way, but I wanted to start a podcast to really explore how organizations are using advocates to help spread their mission,
to get their message,
spread their message, create awareness, create legislative change. Every organization has kind of a different mission and focus. And so it's really looking at how they're using advocates to help drive that mission forward.
That's extraordinary. Do you have a name for the podcast here?
Oh, yeah. It's called Advocacy at Work. And I have a few episodes that are being edited right now and more being recorded. So we're looking for a July launch on that.
That's amazing. We will put all that information in the show notes. I have a final question for you. Tim, how do you define hope?
How do I define hope? I thought about this a lot, and I think it's changed through my cancer journey, but I honestly think, and I actually owned this domain for a while called Wish to Hope, meaning how do we move from wishing something to hoping for something? But I think hope is a wish with conviction behind it.
I love that. That's beautiful. Where can people find you?
You can find me on most social media channels. Twitter/X, I'm T.A. McDonald. Facebook, I'm Tim McDonald. And Instagram and LinkedIn, I am Tim A. McDonald. So you can find me there. And then I do have the site up. It's not really ready yet, but I'm sure by this time, hopefully it will be. It's just advocacyatwork.com. And that's where I will be featuring all the videos, stories, and audio clips from the episodes that I run.
It has been such a delight having you here. Are there any final words of wisdom or hope-filled goodies that you'd like to share with everyone before we go?
Well, I think, and I don't want to really harp on it because I know we've talked about it before, but I honestly think that, the benefit of, just focusing on today and really believing in yourself and not the what ifs, you will start to see opportunities that you never would have been able to see by having that belief.
Tim, thank you for being here. You are a wonderful human being and truly a guiding light. And thank you, friends, for joining us, for allowing this visit with hope. I truly hope that this episode brought a little bit of courage, a little bit of light, and a little bit of good energy your way. Until next time, I hope you take good care of yourself. If there was something inspiring in this conversation, I so hope that you will turn and share it with someone, that you'll send it right out and say, I'm thinking about you. And I think this might just bring a little bit of hope your way. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you for being here. I'm incredibly grateful to the people who support and sponsor the podcast. Sometimes life takes a sharp turn, and when it does, having someone steady in your corner can make all the difference. Chris Dully is a trusted St. Louis attorney who personally guides his clients through criminal defense cases with clarity, compassion, and experience. From traffic violations to serious charges, he shows up fully and directly. Call 314-384-4000 or 314-DUI-HELP, or you can visit dullylawfirm.com for a free consultation.